Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Thursday, April 22nd. We're breaking down the 5-game main slate that we have over on DraftKings today. And it's not looking like a great one. Pitching's pretty gross, and the bats, for the most part, aren't that great either. But we should sift our way through it and find some decent spots today at both positions. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you want to follow me over on social media, the handle is in the bottom corner of your screen. And if you want access to some extra content, support the channel over on Patreon. Link is down below for that. You can join the community. We had several hundred members. Join the Discord chat. You get the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, all that fun stuff. Link is down below. But I think that's it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. As per usual, we will start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And I got to be honest, guys, the pitching is not very good today. The one good spend-up pitcher we have, he's in a real tough matchup versus San Diego Padres. Then we got some real wild cards here, Nick Pivetta and Aaron Sanchez. So, again, not looking forward to the pitching today, but we're going to have to pick two of these guys, and these are the three that look most appealing as of right now. So Walker Buehler here, he's pitching at home, which is nice. Only a 3.28 implied team total against him, which is really good. Pretty heavy favorite as well. 6.5K prop over in Vegas. Always nice when you have the best offense in the league playing with you, because it does give you some nice win equity, which is always a nice 4-point bonus over on DraftKings. But looking at Buehler's numbers the past couple seasons, I mean, it's pretty good. It's a mix of 2020, 2021 data here, but average 96.4 fastball velocity, about 80 pitches per game, which is one bad thing about Walker Buehler because he just does not typically go too deep into games. But with the way this slate is, we're just going to have to kind of deal with it for the most part. But 2.96 ERA, 3.97 xFIP, 3.86 SIERA, 25% K rate. Like, is it super appealing to want to play Walker Buehler at $10,000? Not really, because we see Max Scherzer and those kind of guys priced in similar price points, which I'd always much rather play those guys over a guy like Walker Buehler because he's not quite on their level. Pitch count's always never great either because the Dodgers do kind of have their pitchers on short leashes for the most part, maybe outside of Trevor Bauer. But, I mean, just the way the slate is, I mean, who else are you really going to play? There's just not that many great options. Alex Cobb, Christian Javier, who I believe is in the $9,000 range. I mean, at that point, just give me the Walker Buehler, even though the matchup versus the Padres is pretty tough. But overall, his numbers are pretty solid. And I would say he's the go-to SP1 on this slate. And the Vegas numbers make me feel a little bit more confident in that than I normally would be, because I would think the Padres would have a higher team total here, even though it is Walker Buehler, but 3.28 does make me feel pretty good. And then getting into the SP2 range, we have Nick Pivetta and Aaron Sanchez. Two wild cards here. It could go south for both of them quick. So if you are going to roster one of these guys, it might make sense if you're making multiple lineups to make a hedge stack against these guys. More so the Seattle Mariners versus Pivetta than I would say stacking up the Miami Marlins versus Aaron Sanchez, because I feel like Pivetta could go two ways here. Seattle's a pretty good matchup. They do strike out quite a bit, so I could see Pivetta, a guy that has strikeout upside. He'll give up plenty of power and walk a lot of guys. So I could see this going very well for Pivetta, or he could get blown up here. That's also a hitter-friendly park in Boston. So if you are playing Pivetta today, I think he's viable. I might play him in cash today with Walker Buehler, but it could also go really bad. So you could always make a hedge stack with the Mariners bats, and I do have some Mariners bats listed in the hitter section that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So just keep that in mind when rostering Pivetta today, because it's always a little bit dangerous. But a 4.2 implied team total against him, not too bad. Decently heavy favorite here, 60% chance for a win, so we have some nice win equity, and a 5K prop over in Vegas. But like I mentioned earlier, this is a pretty good matchup for Pivetta. So far this season, the Mariners are striking out at a 27.3% clip, 26% to righties, not really walking too much. The batting average is pretty high, close to 300, but the season is still young. But there are some decent bats in that lineup. I like the strikeout upside here, Pivetta, but just know he's a dangerous pitcher, and it might make sense to make a hedge stack against him using guys like Ty France, Evan White, Mitch Haniger. You could also see some of the other bats as well. Some I'm probably forgetting off the top of my head. Then Aaron Sanchez, $7,100. It's a pitcher-friendly park here, so if you don't want to go Pivetta in cash, I get that. Aaron Sanchez is also a viable option. He's kind of been hovering around that 10 to 15 point range so far this season, which again is not great, but it's not terrible either. And he might be a safer option compared to Pivetta. He's got a lower implied team total against him. The park's better for pitching. And the Miami Marlins lineup, it's not very good. I mean, I know they've kind of had some decent games out there, and I don't think Corey Dickerson's the worst player in the world today, but I'd have less interest in the Miami bats today than I would Seattle, so it might make sense to go down to Sanchez and save a few $100 as well. But he didn't have any numbers last season, so these are strictly just pulling in 2021 numbers, but he's been sitting at 90 miles per hour for his fastball, 74 pitches per game. It's only a 14.2 inning sample size, but a 2.45 ERA. Getting a bit lucky, considering his xFIP's all the way up to 4, only 19% K rate. Not really walking guys too much, but haven't given up too much power either. It's just kind of a soft matchup here versus Miami in a pitcher-friendly park for the most part. Looking at Miami splits this season versus right-handed pitching, virtually no power, 105 ISO, hitting for a really high batting average, but 288 WOBA, 84 WRC plus, 25% K rate. Liking the spot here for Sanchez, and he might be a little bit more safe of an option than Nick Pivetta, because I do have some interest in some Seattle stacks today. But as for Miami, not really any interest there, so I guess that might mean I want to go Sanchez over Pivetta, but I feel like there might be a little bit more upside in Pivetta's arm, but I think you guys get the idea there. So with that being said, just the three guys I kind of have interest. There's a couple more guys you could stretch in there, but not really too interested in anybody else. So moving on to the bats, we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, and hit the outfield as well. And we'll start up top with Will Smith, $4,800, going up against the lefty Ryan Weathers, who wasn't terrible in his first outing, versus the LA Dodgers. But Will Smith, one of the best hitting catchers in the league so far this season. Batting average is pretty low, below 200, 345 WOBA, but the power's up though. 220 ISO, 120 WRC plus, not really striking out too much, walking at a near 20% clip, also near 50% fly ball rate, so he's getting the ball in the air, which I always do like. In the past, he's had better numbers versus righties than he has versus lefties, and so far this season, again, we're working with super small sample sizes, but he is not hitting that great versus lefties. The hard contact's good though, 50%, and only a 14% ground ball rate, so he should be able to lift the ball here, but I wouldn't say Ryan Weathers is a terrible pitcher, and Vegas would agree. I mean, only a 4.2 implied team total for the Dodgers. How often do you see a total that low for the Dodgers? Pretty much the best team in baseball, so gotta be a little bit careful with an expensive catcher here with the team total that low, but it's still one of the best hitting catchers in baseball. He hits in a prime spot in the order. I'm not really sure I want to go with catcher today. If you don't even have to play one of these three guys. If you just want to hunt all the way down with a guy like Sandy Leone, I don't really care. Just at catcher, I typically just play whoever fits at the end. Then going down to the Cubs here, $4,600 going against Joey Lucchesi, and it looks like the wind might be blowing out a bit here for the Chicago Cubs in Wrigley Field. So that is a definite boost for the bats here. Now, Vegas isn't really giving them a super high total here versus Joey Lucchesi, who, not the worst pitcher out there. We're not that great either, but Contreras, he's always had some decent splits versus left-handed pitching. And not saying the Cubs are going to put up 20 runs again. I forget exactly where they were. Was it 16 last night? But anyway, Contreras hits in a good spot for the order compared to most catchers. The total's low, which I don't like, but it's also similar to Will Smith. He's a little bit cheaper, and his numbers versus lefties this season, albeit a very small sample size of 16 plate appearances, but a 429 ISO, 456 WRC plus, OPS above 1,000, and a 60% fly ball rate. So if you want to go to him and some of the righties in the Cubs lineup, I have no issues with that. The wind blowing out is going to help the bats here. James McCann, $3,600 on the flip side of this game. I think Trevor Williams is a much easier pitcher to pick on, so I definitely have more interest in the Mets than I do the Chicago Cubs. And for the most part, the Cubs offense has struggled this year. I know they went off last night, but for the most part, it has struggled. So it wouldn't, surprise me if they went back to those ways. But McCann here, he's fine versus both lefties and righties. I prefer him versus lefties, but not going to complain too much here. He's just at a fair price point. I like the Mets stack today, one of the best stacks in the entire slate. So I think McCann is a fine option. Looking at Williams' splits so far this season, again, we're working with small sample size as well. I guess actually we can expand that to the past 2 seasons. Still a smaller sample size, but 69 innings pitch is not terrible compared to the most guys that we have so far. But since then, he's had a 5.94 ERA, 4.77 xFIP. Sierra's right on par with that, 20% K rate, close to a double-digit walk rate. Johnny batting average giving up over a 200 ISO. So there's definitely some upside here for the Mets bats. And again, the wind blown out will help them as well. Team total close to 5. And dropping down on first base, we have Pete Alonso, $5,000. He murdered a baseball last night, went deep. I think it went outside the stadium. It didn't really go that far. It was just kind of the short part of Wrigley Field. But again, wind blowing out is definitely going to help here. Trevor Williams gives up power to both lefties and righties. Pete Alonso, still the most power in the entire league. So stacking up the Mets doesn't really make sense to leave Alonso out of your lineup. I don't think you have to go there in cash games because of the price point. But to be honest, first base sucks today. I was having some trouble outside of Alonso listing guys that I like. Like, I know I have Barber Gonzalez and Evan White here, but I'm not sure I really like them. I just like to typically put 3 players at each position. So it was rough looking at first base today. So that just might make you go Pete Alonso in cash or just in single entries today. Because unless we get something else, it doesn't look very good for the position. Marwin Gonzalez, $3,700. Boston's looking like the best stack on the slate here versus Justin Dunn. Just not a very good pitcher. And there's some pretty good bats on Boston. They have not been too bad so far this year. J. Martinez is on fire, and some guys like Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, Alex Verdugo, some pretty decent bats in that lineup. So Marwin Gonzalez is just kind of a cheap portion of that lineup in near the bottom of the order, but he's a viable hitter that can hit righties just fine. Evan White, $3,000. like I was saying earlier, I think Pivetta is a decent play tonight, but it could either go two ways. I think it could go either pretty good, or it could end up getting blown up. Now, there's always the possibility it goes, middle of the road, but it's never fun to talk about. So I really do think, though, it could be a good game for Pivetta, or it could go really south. So if you are like on team and going south, just stacking the Seattle bats would make sense, because I do think Pivetta will have some decent ownership today. And Evan White, I mean, he's not that great of a hitter. He's got some speed. That's kind of about it. But if you're stacking the Mariners, he's just a cheap player at a position that doesn't look very good today. Second base, Jeff McNeil, $4,200. Like pretty much all the Mets here versus Trevor Williams. I already talked about him when I was going over James McCann and Pete Alonso, so I'm not going to keep repeating the numbers here. But Jeff McNeil has always had some fine splits versus righties, and I know he hits near the bottom of the order, but again, second base doesn't look too great today, and I do like the Mets quite a bit. Wilmer Flores, $4,100. He just gets a righty on lefty matchup here. And Wilmer Flores, over the course of his career, has just been very, very good at lefties. Not that great versus righties, but versus lefties, he's got some pretty decent numbers. Again, we're working with small sample sizes here, but I'd be kind of curious to see what he's got versus lefties so far this season. So, again, 22 plate appearances, but it doesn't look that good so far. Only 150 batting average, and the numbers kind of suck overall. But if we expand this to the past couple of seasons, they are pretty darn good. And I'd assume those numbers will creep up as the season progresses. Ty France, $3,700. He's been hitting the ball well so far this season. 74 plate appearances, batting above 300, over a 400 WOBA. ISO above 200, on base percentage above 400, is striking out a little bit, but as are pretty much all the Mariners, but only a 27% ground ball rate, so he's lifting the ball. And if you are stacking the Mariners, Ty France would be a pretty key part of that stack. Then dropping down to third base, Rafael Devers, $5,800. He might be close to a core play for me. I know he's really expensive, but he's like the one spin up option I am really liking here quite a bit. Because I like the Boston stack. They have the highest team total on the slate. They're sitting at 5.3. And Devers crushes right-handed pitching. Justin Dunn, not that great of a pitcher. And it's a small slate. And the Boston bats really do stand out above the rest for me. I know the Mets are right there with me, but I'm really liking these Boston bats. So Devers, a guy that kills righties, I think he makes plenty of sense right there, hitting in the middle of the lineup. Plenty of RBI opportunities for him in this game, I'd imagine. Alex Bregman, $4,800. Not loving the Astros, but they do have a decent total here. But Alex Cobb, he's been a guy we'd pick on in the past, but he's looking decent so far this year. I think he started the season with 7 and 10 strikeouts in his respective starts. Pretty good, but Houston, I would say, is probably the toughest matchup he's going to have so far. And yeah, I know, it's just I'm not really loving the Astros here, but they're still decent bats. Like Alex Bregman, Jordan Alvarez, Michael Brantley, these guys do great out fine for me versus Alex Cobb. So if you want to go the Astros today, I don't hate them. They're not overly expensive either. Bregman's not above $5,000. Neither is Brantley. Well, Brantley's at $5,000. Honestly, it's a bit expensive for Michael Brantley. I know I love playing him almost every single day, but once he starts getting into that 5K range and he's not in Coors Field, it starts to get a little bit iffy for me because he doesn't really pack a ton of punch. When he hits for a high batting average, makes plenty of contact. But when you start getting around $5,000, I kind of want some heavy hitters in my lineup. And Michael Brantley, well, he's got some pop, just not a real heavy hitter out there. But anyway, Alex Bregman, he's fine if you are stacking up the Astros. I mean, they're a halfway decent stack today. When you look at the team totals and just look at who's pitching today and some of the teams that are playing, it's like, I guess the Astros are fine today. Then Chris Bryant, $4,500 going against the lefty Joey Lucchesi. So far this season versus lefties, pretty good. Pretty darn good. Only 16 plate appearances, so super small sample size, but he's taking care of business so far. Is striking out at a 31% clip, but he's got a 50% hard contact rate, 565 WRC plus, slugging of 1,000, ISO of 667, WOBA above 500. So yeah, Chris Bryant, if you are stacking up that game, or if you're just stacking up some Cubs, or just getting a couple righties in the Cubs as one-offs, Chris Bryant definitely grades out pretty well at only $4,500. Dropping out of shortstop, we have Xander Bogaerts, $5,700 going against Justin Dunn, like I mentioned earlier. Do like this Red Sox stack quite a bit here, and he's been good so far to start the season. He's batting 385, 434 WOBA, 200 ISO, 181 WRC plus, and OPS above 1,000. So definitely like some Xander Bogaerts if you got the money for him. Francisco Lindor, $4,700. He hit his first home run last night as a New York Met. He's been having a pretty rough start to the season, but do you like all the Mets here? He's gonna have the lefty on righty matchup here versus Trevor Williams. He hits better as a lefty anyway, so definitely like Lindor at the reduced price tag. He's $1,000 cheaper than Bogaerts, so I assume a lot of people are going to go Frankie here in cash games today, and I totally understand that. And then Josh Chisolmir, also eligible at second base, but he's kind of cheap. And if you aren't using Aaron Sanchez, I mean, he's fine here. He's been hitting the ball well this season. He's batting 326, 450 WOBA, ISO above 300, 630 slugging, and you get the lefty on righty matchup here. So if you had to go cheap at shortstop, I personally want to go Lindor in cash today, but if you had to go cheap, I think Jazz is a decent option. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have a lot of guys I think are viable today. Up top, though, we got JD Martinez, $6,000. He is crushing the baseball this year. He's batting .368, 495 WOBA, 382 ISO, 223 WRC plus, and a 750 slugging, hitting lefties and righties. Well, we know he crushes lefties. He's got a righty on the mound today, though, but either way, like JD Martinez quite a bit. If you're stacking the Red Sox, I realize these guys are very expensive, but you should really try to find a way to get Endeavors, Bogarts, and JD Martinez. And overall, the pitching is not super expensive today. And you don't have to play Buehler. Like, you could go Pivetta and Aaron Sanchez today if you want all the bats, but that might be a little iffy there. But even then, Buehler, he hasn't been like amazing so far this year, and he's playing the Padres. So again, pitching not very good today. I feel like this is a slate that's won by the bats. Michael Brantley, $5,000. I kind of already mentioned this with Alex Bregman, but his price is definitely getting up there. So it's going to be hard for me to click on his name at $5,000 outside of just a full-on Astro stack. Like, yeah, he's a great hitter. It's just he doesn't hit for a ton of power. 302 batting average so far this year, 245 ISO. So, I mean, that's fine power so far this season. It's just, as the season goes on, I imagine that gets closer to the lower 200s, maybe even the upper 100s. But he has been hitting the ball well. Doesn't really strike out much. Elite contact hitter, my favorite player in baseball. It's just $5,000 is a bit steep for me, but it's a fine matchup here versus Alex Cobb. Dominic Smith, $4,600. Just another lefty bat here versus Trevor Williams. And I do like the Mets stack today, so I think that kind of speaks for itself. Not going to keep going over the same numbers that I've talked about. Yordan Alvarez, $4,500. Really liking the price point on Yordan, and I would not hate getting there in cash games or in tournaments because that's a cheap price tag for a guy that's just, I mean, got elite bat skills. I mean, the guy the past couple of seasons, his numbers are insane versus both lefties and righties, so I could definitely get behind some Yordan Alvarez here, batting cleanup for a team that I think is pretty viable. And if you're wondering why he hasn't played recently, he got hit on the IL list with among a lot of teammates. Then when he got activated, unfortunately, they were playing in an NL park, so he's the DH, so he couldn't really play because there's nowhere for him to go at any position. So he's going to be back, though, since they're facing an AL team at Houston. So I think Alvarez is back in play. Alex Verdugo, $4,400 if you are stacking Boston up. Hits near the top of the order, and he's just got some decent splits versus right-handed pitching. Not an amazing hitter, but, again, best team on the slate, in my opinion, so I would not hate getting to Verdugo at a fair price point. Then Mitch Haniger, $4,100, kind of part of that. I'm not sure if it's going to be contrarian, but I think a lot of people will play Pivetta today, so I guess it could be contrarian in that part. So Mitch Haniger, $4,100 leading off for the Mariners. Hitting the ball well this season, 78 plate appearances, but batting .315, 382 WOBA, 260 ISO, 154 WRC plus, and a 575 slugging. And Pivetta is a guy that can be a bit of a wild card, and if he's off his game, I think Mitch Haniger will be a very solid play today. Kike Hernandez leading off for, in my opinion, the best stack of this slate as of right now, so I think he's fine. Prefer him versus lefties, but it's fine versus righties. It is just fine in my opinion. Brandon Nimmo leading off for the Mets stack today. Like the Mets quite a bit, so if you are stacking them up, it would make zero sense to me to leave off Brandon Nimmo. He's also been hitting the ball very well this season. Not a ton of power so far. .07 ISO, but a 173 WRC plus with an on-base percentage close to 500 and a near 400 batting average with over a 400 WOBA. So Brandon Nimmo, if you are stacking the Mets, you got to get him in there. Michael Conforto, $3,500. Hasn't been hitting the ball well at all this season. He's only batting 171 with a 267 WOBA, .049 ISO, and a 71 WRC plus. So the numbers have been horrendous for Michael Conforto, but this is a nice get-right spot here, hitting in the middle of the order for the Mets. Do think they're a pretty solid stack today. I've already mentioned that like 500 times, so I think you guys get the gist there, but do like Michael Conforto, even though he has not been hitting the ball well at all so far this season. Then Corey Dickerson, if you're not using Aaron Sanchez, I always like using Dickerson versus right-handed pitching because he's always dirt cheap for some reason. Like, I realize he's on the Marlins, so it's not a good lineup, but I feel like he should always be a bit more expensive than he is. So $3,000 is a fantastic price point versus a guy that doesn't really scare me too much. I mean, Corey Dickerson is probably the only guy that's really scaring me from Aaron Sanchez, but even then, this is a very, very beatable lineup. But Dickerson, he's batting near 300 this year, better splits versus righties compared to lefties, but he's really the only Marlin bat that I would have any interest in whatsoever today. But I think that's going to be it for the video, guys. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really do appreciate it. If you want access to extra content, got projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff is in the link down below. You can follow me over on social media at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter and CPenn16 over on IG. And looking at the time here, I'm just 15 seconds away from 20 minutes, so I might try to find something to ramble on about so we can get specifically to 20 seconds because it looks better over on YouTube. But let me know who your favorite stacks are down below. Who you're going to go with pitching today because it's looking pretty gross. I got 3 more seconds to ramble, but I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you guys in the next video.